Okay, so we'll discuss about the major issues that we have in environment specifically. Now, you might be knowing we have divided this current affairs class into two parts. The one we will be discussing today, or in the next 3-4 lectures, we will be discussing about the current affairs or the major issues from, say, May to December, and December onward, the more current base or the more priority base we will discuss in the next session of the classes, right? Now, when we say the basic idea of environment, of course, you might be knowing about all these things. Environment is divided into three major sections. The first one that deals up with the core idea of ecology. The second one deals up with majority of the pollution related things. The third and the most important one goes into global climate change. And of course, we have issues relative to biodiversity also. So, what we will do, we will have these three discussions in environment. We will look into ecology and pollution, the major issues or the ideas related to ecology and pollution in the first class. The second class we will deal up with the global climate change, the climate policies and the global climate change related scenarios and all those things which are happening right now with the global climate change. We will discuss that in the second class. And the third class we will discuss about the biodiversity, the important aspects of biodiversity that we have, right? You might be having your booklet also with you, the current affairs booklet, not carrying or not being given? Not been given. Booklet. It is there in the PDF form. Okay. So today in the class we will discuss about what is there in the page 1 to 18. I'll specify the issues which are between page 1 to 18. We'll discuss those. Now we'll look up to the ecology based issues or those which have a flavor of ecology first, and then we'll discuss the issues which are there with respect to pollution also, right? The first issue that we have right now is with the co-evolution. इसको थोड़ा सा कम करोगे यार, या इसको बंद कर दो, ज़्यादा है ये. It is one of the issue that you can find in page number 7 of your booklet also, co-evolution, right? Now, when we speak about the basic idea of ecology itself, or when you look into ecology, see, ecology deals up with 2-3 major things. First aspect is it deals up with things relative to biotic factors, things relative to abiotic factors. All of you have gone through environment earlier also, no? Right? You might be knowing all these things. जहाँ पे लगता है कि ये नहीं पता है, बता देना. बेसिक में कई बार अगर चीजें नहीं पता है तो you just ask. We speak about biotic and abiotic things. Abiotic being the sunlight, water, air, temperature, soil. Biotic beings the living beings of the surrounding. Then with ecology we speak about the interactions or interrelationships. Different types of interrelationships we can see between the living beings in our surrounding, and the biotic influences over abiotic, right? This is the basic idea about the ecology that we look into, where we'll find the food chain and food web related things. We'll also find the aspects of biomagnification, etc. These are those things which are there in ecology, or the topics which are there in the ecology. Now, when we look up to the basic interactions between the living beings, the basic interaction between the living beings is symbiosis, right? Now, what we are talking about right now, the issue which has been spoken of as co-evolution between the cuckoo species and the songbird species that we have right now, right? So that links it up, that simply links it up to biotic interactions. Now, biotic interactions can be of various types. First, we can look up to the biotic interactions. Biotic interactions can be of various types. They can be positive interactions and they can be negative interactions, which are all cumulatively taken up as symbiosis, right? Symbiosis can be something when living beings have an interaction in the surrounding. In any form, if the living beings are there, be it be positive interaction, be it be negative interaction, any form of the interaction that living beings has with the other living being, that is symbiosis. Now this non-living beings are not being included over here. Just the living beings are being included, and whenever a living being has an interaction with the other living being, it is just a symbiosis. Like for example, if you eat over any particular organism, that is also symbiosis. You kill rice plant and you eat a paddy plant and you eat rice, that is also symbiosis. Or the basic example that you might have heard about the leguminous plant and the rhizobium bacterium, all of you might be knowing about that particular example. That is symbiosis. Whenever two living beings are there together, that is symbiosis. Devoid of being positive or it being negative, it would be symbiosis, simply. Now, these interactions can be of various types. When it is mutually beneficial, it is mutualism. Is it visible? When it goes on to become mutually beneficial, it becomes mutualism. There are multiple examples of mutualism that we can see. This is the basic thing that you must be reading also. When we have co-evolution, there could be questions asked about that also, right? Mutualism examples, we can see rhizobium and leguminous plant, the mycorrhiza examples, the lichen examples. These are all the basic examples of mutualism. Lichen, mycorrhiza, leguminous plants and rhizobium example, they are all the examples of, we can say, the mutualism. The second type of interaction that we see between the living beings, that is commensalism, where one is being benefited, the other one is not being taken care of. It is not harmed, but it is not being taken care of. That becomes commensalism. There are multiple examples of commensalism also. We can see the zebrafish and the sharkfish example is there. The E. coli bacteria in the human gut is also an example of commensalism, right? Then we have examples of parasitism. Parasitism is when one particular organism lives over the other organism, either inside the body or outside the body. That becomes parasitism. Is also a type of food habit between the living beings. And parasitism examples, we can see COVID-19 bacteria in the humans, the streptococcus bacteria in the humans. These are all the examples of parasitism. Then we also have an example of amensalism. Amensalism becomes a negative interaction between living beings when one living being or one type of organism kills the other organism through various different modes. Usually in case of amensalism, different types of chemicals are being secreted, and because of the impact of these chemicals, the organisms are being killed. Like the basic example of antibiotics, or we look into the basic example of, we can say, the sacred basil killing other types of the plants, or we also look into the examples of smoother crops which are being grown in the crop fields, where they kill up or they reduce the overall growth of, we can say, the herbs and the weeds, etc. Right? That is also an example of amensalism. Then we have competition, where either it can be negative or it can be positive. In this, these are all not there in the PDF. Or you can simply just understand these things. You might have read about all these things.
When the paper is there is one line, this is this or not that. And within 1 minute I have to take a call. So I should know at least that much to answer it on the spot.
If you have gone through foundation classes, or if you have gone through, you have taken all those things. So this is there in your notes also. Huh? Okay, fine. Competition, etc. All these can be the examples. Then there could be predation, when something eats over other thing. Then there could be mutualism, when two organisms live together but they do not have an influence on each other, right? Then there could be herbivory, where organisms eat over grasses, etc., or the plants, etc. That is herbivory. Or there could be parasitism, where small organisms grow over a parasite itself, right? This was a question last year itself, 2024 PT. So if you think that many a times parasitoidism was a question being asked last year itself, right? So mostly, although that was there in current affairs, but the basic question was asked over here. That's why I'm linking this particular thing back towards all these interactions. And then there is an interaction between living beings which is called as the co-evolution interaction. Now, co-evolution is a type of method in which one organism lives over the other, or one organism survives over the other in such a way Say for example, you might have heard about cuckoo. कोयल जानते हो सब लोग? You know कोयल जानते हो ना? How does it produces, or how does it hibernates over its eggs, or how does it takes care of its eggs? कौवे के घोंसले में। 3 इडियट्स सबने देखी है ना? देखा है ना? सबसे पहला एग्जाम्पल वही है ना, कोयल अपना अंडा ले जाके कहाँ छोड़ती है? कौवे के घोंसले में छोड़ती है, ठीक है ना? और फिर कौवे के घोंसले में क्या होता है? कौवा उस घोंसले को पालता है। The same thing is being looked upon as a research right now, which is there in the current affairs. The cuckoo and the songbird, they have been taken up as two co-evolving species. Now this cuckoo lays its egg over the nest of the songbird, right? Which is also a bird. Now the songbird, now usually the chickens or the chicks of cuckoo, they resemble the chicks of songbird itself. They resemble the chicks of songbird morphologically, or just by looking onto their body structures. They look like the songbird species, right? And so the songbird takes care of all the chicks, the chickens, they grow over, and then they grow into cuckoos with certain adaptations just like songbirds. Just like songbirds. So it itself becomes a new species, where we will find it is not behaviorally, it is not exactly like cuckoo. Morphologically, it is not like songbird, but it has certain adaptations which are being taken up. Genetically, it may be a cuckoo, but with adaptations which resemble the songbird, right? It is just like कि वो यार mythology में एक example है ना कृष्णा का. Krishna was born somewhere else and was being taken care of by the other mother, right? And he resembles the characteristic of the mother which has raised that particular child, right? It is just like that it is a species of cuckoo, but it resembles, or the adaptations are like songbird. So this becomes co-evolution. Co-evolution means that one type of this species, if it evolves, the other species which may be dependent or which is being influenced by that particular species also evolves. सबसे best example इसका होता है, for example, you take up a example of humans and any of its parasite, that may be virus, right? If the virus attacks over humans, and humans are not in a particular capability of creating an immunity against the virus, right? It will always be in a state of parasitism, or it will always be in a state of being a dominance over human society, right? But if humans or its immune system starts evolving, now humans which are now being converted into the immune humans, the viruses, the same virus may not be able to create a virulency over this particular human, right? It would not be able to attack, or it would not be able to create a disease in the humans. But eventually, over a period of time, viruses also evolve their modus operandi, or evolve their mode of attack over the humans, and they evolve into a more virulent species which can again create a disease. Just take up an example of various different types of influenzas that we have. Take up an example of influenza, right? Every season or every now and then you will have cough, cold, sneezing, all of these taking place, and it is all being taken up by an array of influenza bacteria, influenza viruses, right? Now every season you will have an influenza, and in the next season you will have an mutated influenza, right? Which is again virulent. Now you have an immunity being developed for the influenza strain or the variant which was there in the last season, but new season, new strain, new evolved species or mutated species has came up. So if we are evolving, say by behavior, we are evolving by structure, we are evolving by methods, we are evolving by our reactions, ways, means, etc. In the same way, our parasite is also evolving. So it is in a state of co-evolution. This is the basic idea of co-evolution. There are multiple examples of co-evolution that we can look up to also. like the predator and the prey example, where the faster evolution of cheetahs, right, develops a greater speed in the pronghorns, the otherwise what we can say the deer species. If the cheetah starts running faster, the deer runs the fastest because it has to escape the prey and the predator problems, right? So that is a kind of co-evolution, right? In the same way, if there could be the same example that we have said, the host defense and the parasite virulence is also an example of co-evolution, right? The mutualistic relationship where the long proboscis in the moth or the insects is because of the long nectar tubes of the flowers. Flowers usually have nectars deep inside their or plants do have nectars deep inside their flowers. If this tube is longer, the insect which is eating over the nectar or the pollens of this particular flower will also have a stronger beak, right, which is the proboscis, right, which is also a mutualistic relationship, but it is also a co-evolution example. Ants and fungi, right? Ants and fungi, they live together. Now usually fungi over here would utilize the nutrients which are present in the soil, and it will harvest the ants, which otherwise will protect the fungi and its colony from any kind of the host or any other species which may disrupt or destroy the fungi colony. In this, ants will get food from the fungi. Now this is also co-evolution, where if the fungi patterns evolve, the ants also evolve. That's why the ants or the funguses, they are being called as the farmers of ants. Why they are being called as farmers of ant? This basic example or this particular thing is being spoken of quite a number of times. In various different exams, it is also been spoken of that which of the following are the farmers of ants? Fungi are the farmers of the ants because they help in creating colonies in the soil. The fungi help in creating the colonies of ants in the soil, and in turn becomes the harvester of the ants. In return, the ants provide a protection for that fungi colony. Now, if they evolve or if they go into a larger domain, the ants also go into a larger domain. If they occupy a larger area, the ants also occupy the larger area, right? That is also one thing. The mimicry of various different types of the organisms. You might have, or you scroll down the videos, you can see different types of the monkeys, specifically the ape varieties. And there are 2-3 varieties of the monkeys. Specifically in India, we have the Assamese monkey that we have. It resembles the sound of a tiger. It creates a sound of a tiger, right? So even if there are certain prey or predator based problems associated with that monkey, it will resemble a sound being created by a prey itself or by a predator itself to confuse the organisms in the nearby, right? That is also a co-evolution. It evolves with the scenario. So co-evolution is nothing but if your existence condition evolve, you also evolve according to the existence condition. This is the basic thing, right? Darwin's theory speaks about that if the nature changes, you also change. Survival of the fittest speaks about the same thing, no? If your surrounding would change, you will also change. Also, in the same way, according to that theory itself, if your host changes, you will also change. If you are living with something, if that changes, you will also change behaviorally, change morphologically, or even change genetically. Like for example, viruses change genetically. The cuckoo and the songbird change, it creates an adaptation for morphological changes. All of these become the basic example of co-evolution, right? अब इससे question कैसा बन सकता है? What do you think can be a question? Are you willing to write a question? I'll try to arrange questions from the next class onward. I'll try to arrange them in the PPT itself so that that saves your time. But just which of the following defines the idea of co-evolution? A, B, C, D can be the choices, right? Statement number A, two organisms living together. Two organisms living together and interacting for benefits. Second, two organisms living together one benefited, another harmed. Third, two organisms living together one evolves, other also evolves. Next one, D, if the host of the parasite evolves, the parasite finds new host. Right? Option choice number C is the correct answer. Right? Two living together, one evolves, the other one evolves. Right? One more question you can frame over here for co-evolution. Which of the following exhibit co-evolution? One, deers and cheetah. Second, fungi and ants. Third, cuckoos and songbirds. Legumes and bacteria. Which of them are correct? How many of them are correct? Only one, only two, only three, all of them. Right, deers and cheetah, yes, we have seen. Fungi and ants, yes, we have seen. Cuckoos and songbird, the basic example currently. Legumes and bacteria, that is an example of mutualism, right? So simple, three of them are correct. These are simple questions, just we need to have an idea about the things, right? They may remain factual in nature, but they also become conceptual when you don't have an idea. Like just you simply look up to the question of parasitoidism in the last year, the same way. If the students had the idea, they knew the question. If they didn't had the idea, they didn't knew the question. It's as simple as that. The next thing that we can look up to in our booklet. Yeah, please. Cuckoos and crow वाला एग्जाम्पल पैरासाइटिज्म नहीं है, वो उसने पैरासाइटिज्म के बाद एक अलग से एस्पेक्ट बना के दिया हुआ, उसने डिफाइन किया है उसको दूसरे तरीके से. पैरासाइटिज्म नहीं है वैसे, ठीक है, वो को एवोल्यूशन ही है. कॉन्सेप्ट्स इवॉल्व होता है ना, एनसीईआरटी भी इवॉल्व होने में थोड़ा टाइम लगेगा, ठीक है. एनसीईआरटी वाज रिटन इन 2006, अभी जो आप पढ़ रहे हो They are preparing a new NCERT also. Things evolved much faster. वैसे उसमें symbiosis भी लिखा है, then when two organisms live together and have a mutually beneficial relationship, that is called as symbiosis. It is written in NCERT. But in 2014, the basic definition of symbiosis is changed. That the two species when living together and interacting, that is called as symbiosis. Right? Now that interaction can be either positive or negative. Simply, the definitions do change over a span of time. Next thing, or the next issue that we have is relative to corals. There are two major issues relative to corals in your notes. The first one is relative to the Lakshadweep bleaching up of the corals, the crisis of coral bleaching, and the second issue is about the corals in crisis, or 44% of the reef building species in the world they are under threat. These are two issues that we can look up to with this particular explanation. Now you might be knowing about corals. Okay? Corals, they are important ecosystems which are being created near the we can say oceanic shelves itself, right, or near the shallow water regions, the water which are much more calmer, which have a moderate temperature conditions, these different types of organisms which are being created. Now corals, they basically are a kind of polyp-like organism, right? They are polyps. What are polyps? Are type of animals, the basic classes of the animals when we look up to, right? The basic class of the animals are sponges, and the second class of the basic organisms are coelentrates. Or also called as the cnidarians. Right? Biology पढ़ा होगा थोड़ा सा, classification पढ़ोगे तो the first second class of the organism, they are cnidarians or the coelentrates, right? They look like this. This is the basic polyp morphology. Right? And they have different body line structures which are being created. These are called as the tentacles of the polyps, right? The body is fixed over a calcium basement or a calcium base layer, which actually is created by their precursors, right? The precursor generation. The precursor generation calcium is being used as a base. Then these polyps, they establish themselves over that particular base, and then they store calcium all around their body again, right? Which is called as corallite. So the one which is in blue is polyp. The one which is surrounding in orange is the corallite, right? Which eventually becomes the basic structure or the basic skeleton of the polyps. Now they remain fixed generally, right? The polyps remain fixed, and in their tentacles they host various classes of the algae over here. This coral and the algae association becomes the zooxanthale. Just the basic idea of it, right? This becomes the zooxanthale. This is a mutualistic relationship that we see. What is mutualism? If we define the interactions of it, right? Now, algae which is being placed over here makes the food, which again feeds the polyp. Polyp provides the fixation to the algae. That becomes a mutually beneficial and important relationship. This is mutualistic in a sense that neither the coral or neither the polyp nor the algae can survive independently. They all require each other, right? They both require each other. If there is no polyp, there is no algae. If there is no algae, there is no polyp. This becomes the basic idea, right? Now we look up to various different types of conditions in which the polyps grow. They grow in clear water, right? There must not be any kind of sedimentation with the polyps or with the water. The temperature must be moderate, that must be above 18 degrees centigrade, right? there must be energetic wave action. Wherever they are growing, there must be proper wave action which must be present, because that brings in more amount of sediments and nutrients which are being mixed up in the zones in which the corals are being growing, right? The precipitation of calcium is also required with those nutrients, which then forms the calcitite of the polyps or the outer body structure, and it requires low carbon dioxide concentration also. And if the concentration of the carbon dioxide in its vicinity increases, more of the carbon dioxide would dissolve in water. That would create acidic condition in those regions in which they will grow, and that will lead towards death of corals also, right? And it requires a hard substrate. Why I'm trying to speak all these things? Because disturbance in any of these would lead towards the disappearance or the death of corals, and this death of corals become coral bleaching, which itself is one of the major problem right now that the corals are facing. The corals are getting bleached out. That means they are getting devoid of their algae, the mutualistic algae, not getting enough food, not getting survival environment, not getting the survival, and all of them, they are constantly dying. Right now, with the climate change, with increasing concentration of carbon dioxide, with increasing temperature conditions, the conditions in which the corals can prevail, and also the increasing sea level, the conditions in which the corals can prevail, that is clear water, ocean temperature, and the carbon dioxide concentration is getting compromised. And if it is getting compromised, because of that compromised condition, the corals are getting into a state of coral bleaching. And it is being spoken of that approximately 44% of the corals, which are of the echons and the staghorns classes, they are under the threat, which is being spoken of in your current affairs thing also. Now we speak about the types of corals. Now what is this echon and staghorn? If you look up to the types of corals, you will find three different types of these structures formed of coral. The first one, which is, if we look into, this is the seashore, and this is the shallow water condition. If the reefs, they grow just near the coastline, they become the barrier reef, or the corals, if they grow just near the coastline or in the shallow water, they become the barrier reef. If they grow a little bit further in the shallow water regions, or precisely deep water regions, then they become the fringing reefs. And if they grow in the deep water over a span of time and they emerge as an island, that becomes a coral atoll. So barriers, fringing, and atolls are three different classes of the corals that we see all across our coral distribution in the global map, right? If we look up to this again, then we have three different zones associated with corals also. The one which is called as the drop-off zone, which is a deeper zone where you will find corals at approximate depth of 20 to 40 meters. They become deep water corals, right? Such type of the corals, they are also called as the plate corals, right? Plate corals. They catch light over there because the depth of light penetration in water can be, or the light penetration which can be usually useful for photosynthesis can be up to 60 to 80 meters. So they get enough light over here in this particular zone, but they are comparatively deeper placed, right? The second type of the corals, or the second type of the coral zone, is called as the fore reef zone, which is in a comparative shallower region where the depth of water is between approximately 5 to 20 meters, more precisely 10 to 20 meters. You will find these become the shallow water corals. There are two species or type of species in these shallow water corals. One of them is called as the staghorn coral. The another one is called as the echon coral. Comparatively, the staghorn coral grows in water between 10 to 20 meters, whereas the echon corals, they grow in water between the 5 to 10 meters. These are two different classes of the corals that we see growing in two different zones near the shallow water regions or near the continental shelves, right? Now, right now, much of the emphasis or much of the problem is seen over staghorn and the acorn corals because of increasing water level. Number one. The second, since they are much nearer to the land or they are in a closer proximity to the land, the pollutants which we see, pollutants that we see from the land-based things or the man-made things is also increasing the threat towards their bleaching. Also, with increasing carbon dioxide level, which is just near the land itself, if we are burning more amount of the fossil fuels just near the land or in the shallow water or near the shallow water regions, more of the carbon dioxide is present in the coastal regions. The concentration of the coastal carbon dioxide is increasing, which again would dissolve in water over here and would create localized acidification also in these conditions. There is a global acidification of the oceans, and then there could be localized acidification. If we look up to, say, if this is the Indian coastline, if we look up to this, then there could be a zone which is influenced by more of the coastal carbon dioxide. If it is influenced by more of the coastal carbon dioxide, which is there in the lower atmosphere near the coastlines, it would dissolve more in water over here and would create more of the localized acidified conditions, which may be short living because this can again be resolved because of constant flowing up of the water, flowing up of the nutrients, but constant dissolution and constant formation of these acidified conditions influences the corals over here which are present, and specifically the corals which are the staghorns and the acorns which are found between 5 to 20 meters, which is basic depth near the we can say tide lines also, which is the basic depth near the continental shelves also, and this creates a problem over here, right? And then we can also have the reef flat zones and the back reef zones and the shore zones. If this is the shore zone, then we can have back reef zones which are being created between high tide line and the low tide line. Low tide, high tide, we have the back reef zones, and then we have the reef flat zones which we have little amount of the reefs growing in certain areas if the shorelines are stony. If the shorelines are stony, we will find little amount of corals growing in those regions. Although all of these, from say growing in the reef flat zones or in the four reef zones, they are being taken up as those which are the shallow water corals. And with changing climate and increasing concentration of carbon dioxide and the acidification problems, much of the problem, or even the pollutants flowing across from the land, much of the problem is being seen over these shallow water corals, which is being spoken of right now in the current affairs, right? So if we look up to the basic coral zones across India, then we have Gulf of Mannar, we have Lakshadweep, where much of the coral is being seen. Then we have the Gulf of Kutch, where the corals are being seen. Andaman and Nicobar, we have the corals which are being seen. These are the major zones where we will find the corals right now. Corals provide large-scale ecosystem services also. You know about ecosystem services? Ecosystem services are 4 classes of the services that an ecosystem provides. These are 4 different classes. They could be provisioning services, regulating services, cultural services, and supporting services. Provisioning services are those where any kind of the ecosystem, that may be forest, that may be coral, that may be mangrove, any kind of the ecosystem provides something. If it provides something, that becomes provisioning, right? If it is providing food, if it is providing say timber, or if it is providing fuel, it provides anything. If it provides anything to humans, that becomes the provisioning services. Then becomes the regulating services. Regulating services are those where it acts in regulation of the ecosystem things, right? Be it be biotic or abiotic factors, like for example nutrient cycle, carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, any ecosystem influencing that particular thing becomes the regulating service. Then becomes the supporting services. If it supports in both the things, either in provision or in regulation, becomes supporting, right? And then we have the cultural services, tourism, recreation, religious aspects of any ecosystem becomes the cultural services. The corals, they have a large scale provisioning services aspect on the humans because it provides large scale food and fish, shellfish, etc., right? Genetic resources. It provides natural medicine and pharmaceuticals also. The algae would provide the biomolecules also. The ornamental resources, gems, jewelries, etc., they come out from the corals itself. The building material, because the calcium alginate which is present in those regions or the hard coral zones, then the calcium can also be harvested from these regions. Then it also provides regulating services because it helps in control of the erosion. It creates a hard shoreline, so it helps in containing the shoreline also, right? Storm protection, etc. Then spiritual and religious values, etc., recreation, ecotourism, etc., has been provided from the corals. So a large scale ecosystem benefits are being seen from corals, and approximately 25% of the all marine life are directly or indirectly influenced by corals, be it by food, be it by the regulation of the things over here, coastal protection, medicine, tourism, etc. All of them are being provided as the ecosystem services of the corals. Right now, the corals are facing a large scale threat, right? And these threats are because of, number one, ocean warming, with increasing concentration of carbon dioxide or even the greenhouse gases. The annual mean temperature of the lower atmosphere is increasing. Do you follow? जो बात हो रही है समझ में आ रही है या is it going into your things, right? The annual mean temperature is increasing constantly, right? And because of the warming up of the lower atmosphere, the oceans or the temperature of the oceans is also increasing. It is increasing gradually, not exactly as it is seen on the land, but it is increasing because the oceans have a higher, we can say, latent energy. So it heats up slow and it cools down slow also, right? So right now the oceans, they are constantly getting warmed up, and warming up of the ocean has created a change in the moderate temperature requirements of the corals. That's why they require an 18 degree or near about 18 degree conditions, and if it is increasing, right now the annual average increase in the ocean temperature on Earth is approximately by 0.67 degrees centigrade. That is, on land is reaching up to 1.1 degree centigrade. This is increase in the annual mean temperature of the surface of the earth and of the oceans also. So right now the oceans which may have an annual average of the temperature being 14 degrees centigrade, the temperature is now increasing from 14 degrees centigrade to 14.7 degrees centigrade. This is the average temperature. In various different zones, the localized heating can be much more higher. And that's why much of the impact can be seen, much of the impact of this particular warming can be seen on the tropical zones, where the average increase can be a bit higher than the polar conditions, right? And in the tropical zones itself, or near the islands of the tropical zones, the overall diversity of the staghorn and the echorn corals is much more higher, which are the shallow water corals. And with increasing temperature, the overall distribution of echorns and the staghorns in the tropical condition is getting influenced right now, right? ये increasing temperature का एक सबसे बड़ा problem है. The second problem is also because of oceanic acidification. With increase in carbon dioxide, or if the carbon dioxide is present in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide reacts with water at low temperature and it forms carbonic acid, H2CO3. This carbonic acid harvests more of the hydrogen ion in the oceans, which then decreases the pH of the oceans. If the pH of the oceans decreases, the acidification conditions also increases. Already with the increase in temperatures, say from 1750 to, if we speak about 2020, which is the base year right now, the pH of the oceans have already changed by 0.3 to 0.4, being more acidic, right? This change in the acidity would create a susceptibility towards survival of the algae present with the corals, and eventually would kill the algae because they are more sensitive towards change in the pH based conditions, which eventually then leave corals without the algae, which would become a condition of coral bleaching, and eventually the polyps would die, or the coral zones would also die, right? Which is also one major problem. Then cyclones and the other physical stresses are also much more higher because of the climate change. With the climate change itself, the frequency of the cyclones, specifically in the tropical regions, have increased, where the destruction of the coral reefs is again being seen. Not only destruction, it also creates a post-storm condition, where in the post-storm condition, if there is drainage or much amount of the sediments in the coastal regions deposited in the coastal regions, would also create a problem over the growth of the corals also, right? Which is also one thing. Then the terrestrial runoff and the pollution is creating more amount of the sediments in the shallow water regions, which is creating again an impact over the acorns and the staghorn corals. Staghorns and the acorns are much more impacted because of the industrialized coastal cities also. Just like Mumbai, if we have, or we have Chennai, the coral reefs are getting much more impacted because of it also, right? And also the loss of herbivores, that may be the loss of algae, etc., that may be, or the variety of the algae which are present over there, or the basic microflora which is present over there, that can also lead towards loss of corals itself, which will create an impact of coral bleaching, where the algae would be lost, the color of the corals would be lost, and the polyps would die eventually, right? Reduced reef calcification would be seen, because less amount of the calcium would be formed by the polyps. If they are dying, polyps would also die. There is no calcification. There is no layer of coral which would be deposited, right? Because coral layers, they are being deposited every year, year by every generation. Now, if this is the last generation which sees coral bleaching, and it does not multiplies and reproduces at the same rate the way the earlier generation has done, so the number of corals would eventually reduce, and this can also lead towards a particular state that it may remain the last generation of the corals, beyond which we will not see the polyps, right? And eventually whatever coral we can see right now would remain in that particular state also. Number one. Plus, no more calcium is being added to this particular rock, the hard rock which is being created by the corals. If no more calcium or the calcium alginate is being added into this, the rock formation processes in the coastal regions would also terminate, which eventually lead towards shallowing up of these also. Plus, additional to this, the oceanic acidification would also lead towards dissolution of the calcium from the coral colonies. More amount of the calcium carbonate would be liberated from the coral colonies, and that eventually would create coral structures being more destructible, right? So that also would lead towards the reduced reef calcification, then loss of corals, reef structure and the habitats, of course, right? Then reduced water quality, etc. The loss of algal control would also be lost, right? Which eventually would lead towards loss of sensitive reef builders, reduced species richness, reduced coral and the reef resilience, and vulnerability, that is loss of the complete ecosystem and its goods and services would be seen because of this particular thing, which is being spoken of right now, right? Is being seen in the Lakshadweep, the bleaching is being seen in across the various species of the tropical corals also, right? So there are multiple threats like the pollution from the land, where we can have problems associated with agriculture, road construction, oil and chemical soils, etc., spills, etc. Then we can have deforestation, which is creating problem, the storm water runoff, which is creating problem, some chemicals from the sunscreens, etc., that is also creating problems. Then the septic systems that we have, if we do not treat the water and leave it directly into the oceans or the open ocean, that would also create problem, that is also creating problem. Then overfishing is also creating a problem over the coral regions, where various different things like the ghost net, fishing, etc., Usually what the fishermen would do, they will leave their nets over there, right? And it would then flow down somewhere. It would then flow down somewhere and it would then get stuck up in the coral regions itself, which will destruct the corals. Now that net is stuck up in the corals and is being pulled off, pulled upon, or by the water storm itself. That would break down the coral colony also, right? That is also one problem. Another thing which becomes the ghost net fishing. Another problem over here is with the blast fishing. Blast fishing is when we will have small amounts of the explosives being used over here in the coastal regions, and because of these small amount of the explosive, the coral colonies also get disturbed over here, right? And then there could be problems associated with indiscriminate fishing, where we pull up, where we have vessel fishing. Vessel fishing is we send in large scale vessels. We send in large scale vessels deep into the oceans, and we suddenly pull up this vessel, which eventually pulls up all these species which may be important for corals for their ecosystem and ecosystem associations also, or it also hits the coral in the shallow water region, which destructs the coral also. So ghost net or blast or vessel fishing, etc., this will all lead towards a particular state that will destruct the corals also, right? Coral bleaching, if we look up to, and in the state of bleaching, if this looks into a healthy coral, then the stressed coral would be when the algae starts to reduce its function, and the bleached coral would be when the algae is lost completely. This bleaching is mostly because of acidification, is mostly because of increased amount of sediments in any particular area, or because of pollution itself, right? Sunscreens are also creating problems. Specifically, sunscreen react with the algae which are present, and it bleaches out the algae which is present with the corals, and that lead towards loss of corals also. Also mussels, etc. If they engulf, mussels are the small fishes which are present over there. If they engulf the chemicals which are present in the sunscreen, that will also lead towards the loss of corals over here. Specifically, calciums like, is it visible that this box is visible? Like the benzaldehyde camphor, or the methylmidine camphor, etc., or octocrylene, and specifically PABA, this polyacryl benzophenone, right? Then the nano zinc oxide, which is being used specifically in the tropical regions, more of it, and oxybenzones, which are being used specifically. Now, if a simple question can be raised over here, which of the following can be problems associated with oxybenzones, the type of chemicals which are called as oxybenzones, right? You can write down a question over here. Excuse me. With respect to chemicals like oxybenzones, with reference to chemicals like oxybenzones, which of the following can be a greater risk associated? A, B, C, D, right? A, it is a neurotoxin. Toxin kills the fishes and humans. Kills fishes and humans. Neurotoxin kills fishes and humans. Second, it reduces the growth of kelps, kelp, reduces the growth of kelp in the marine ecosystems. C, causes bleaching up of corals, and increased morbidity of fishes. Statement number D, it is cancerous to humans causes skin cancer. Right? The best choice could be C. Right? One more you can write down with respect to this. Consider following statements for oxybenzones. Statement number 1, these are chemicals found in sunscreen lotions. Which helps to reduce the impact of ultraviolet rays. Statement number 2, divers using these chemicals leads to loss of corals. Statement number 3, it can also be a cancer causing agent if accumulated in higher amounts. Right? So specifically these sunscreen lotions, they itself remain in current affairs. The problems associated with sunscreen lotions, right? Oxybenzones specifically. The chemicals of the classes of oxybenzones, right? Fine, they are being used as the primary generations of the sunscreens, right? They are primary sunscreens which are being used, but they have a solubility, a better solubility in fats, right? When they are being used by the divers, if the divers they use such type of the things, they get dissolved off, or they can partially get dissolved out and clear. They will create a layer over oceanic water, which is then taken up by fishes or is in the marine ecosystem. From here goes into humans, and if it is accumulated in higher quantity, is one of the major cause right now for liver cancer, liver and blood cancer, which is a recent report also. Also, This goes into the coral colonies and creates a fatty appearance over the coral colony, creates a fatty layer over the coral colonies, which then reduces the absorption of a greasy layer over the coral colonies is being created, which then reduces the absorption of photosynthetically active radiation in the algae, right, which eventually would kill the algae, right. So that lead towards bleaching. Specifically in the European population, post 1982, the events of hepatic and the blood cancers have increased, and the recent report says that the causative agents can be the oxybenzones, right? This is not only linked over here, this is linked over there also, the sunscreen lotions. So जो क्वेश्चन हमने लिखा है, हाउ विच ऑफ देम, इसका ऑप्शन लिख लीजिए, चॉइसेस ए ओनली 1 and 2, बी ओनली 2, सी ओनली 2 and 3, डी all of the above, and the correct answer should be D, all of the above. स्किन में लगाने से कैंसर तो नहीं है, अक्यूमुलेशन है, बट स्किन में लगाओगे तो अक्यूमुलेट ज्यादा हो रहा है, जितना ज्यादा लगाओगे उतना ज्यादा अक्यूमुलेट होके ब्लड स्ट्रीम में जाएगा, वैसे भी जाएगा सनस्क्रीन, और जितना ज्यादा स्किन में लगाओगे उतना ज्यादा अक्यूमुलेट होगा, उतना ज्यादा लिवर पे जाएगा, उतना लिवर सेल को डैमेज भी करेगा ब्लड स्ट्रीम में अगर ये गया। और अभी देखा है कि इसका जो सेफ बाउंड्री था वो 8 ppm तक था, ह्यूमन ब्लड में अक्यूमुलेट होगा ये पता था, 8 ppm उसका सेफ बाउंड्री था, लेकिन अभी अक्यूमुलेशन 120 ppm से ज्यादा है, कुछ पॉपुलेशन 8 parts per million, right? ppm, it is accumulated up to 120 parts per million. How many times? 10 to 15 times more than what it should have been accumulated in the human body, which is creating a much higher problem, right? So important क्या है, ये type of chemicals को याद रखना, oxybenzones और the classes of chemicals that we see over here. Right? Nano titanium यूजली ऑक्सीबेंजोन्स ये ज्यादा चलता है, ऑक्सीबेंजोन्स और ऑक्टोक्राइलिन, दीज आर केमिकल्स जनरली करंट अफेयर्स में अगर हम टर्म्स को इधर उधर देखेंगे ना तो ये टर्म हमको ज्यादा देखने में, ठीक है। देन क्लाइमेट चेंज इटसेल्फ इज अ थ्रेट टू कोरल रीफ्स। द क्लाइमेट चेंज रिलेटेड थ्रेट्स लिखा नहीं है क्या, कुछ लिखना है? एसी ऑन करना है, ऑफ करना है? ऑन कर दो भाई, एसी एसी ऑन कर दो। Climate change is also causing a greater threat over here, where we can see that because of climate change itself, the oceanic warming, the sea level rise, the changes in the storm pattern, the changes in precipitation, the altered oceanic cycles, and the pH, they are all becoming the major reasons associated with bleaching up of the corals with the climate change, right? You can mark up a question also over here. Which of the following are the reasons associated with climate change? Which of the following are the reasons associated with climate change causing coral bleaching? Statement number 1. Changes in the rainfall cycle. changes in the rainfall cycle. Statement number 2, changes in the nutrient upwelling cycle. Upwelling cycle. Statement number 3, increasing sea level. Number 4, increased concentration of carbon dioxide in atmosphere. Number 5, increased frequency of coastal disasters like cyclones. Which of the above are correct? Only 2, 3 and 5. Only 2, 3, 4 and 5. Only 1, 2, 3 and 5. All of the above. All of the above. हाँ एग्जैक्टली इसलिए मैंने रेनफॉल लिखवाया. रेनफॉल साइकिल वुड डिस्टर्ब तो बहुत सारे रीजन्स में जहाँ पे अदरवाइज जैसे चेन्नई है, कोस्टल एरिया है, फ्लडिंग नहीं होती थी, अर्बन फ्लडिंग. अब वो रेनफॉल पैटर्न चेंज हो रहा है, अर्बन फ्लडिंग हो रहा है. अर्बन फ्लडिंग होगा तो अर्बन फ्लडिंग के साथ क्या होगा, उसका सेडिमेंटेशन भी होगा, कोस्टल कोरल जोन्स को डिस्टर्ब करेगा. ठीक है. अदरवाइज जिन रीजन्स में सेडिमेंटेशन हो रहा था, कोरल्स के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट न्यूट्रिएंट्स मिल रहे थे, रेनफॉल पैटर्न चेंज होने से वो भी होगा. अगर डिवाइड ऑफ रेनफॉल हो जाएगा, लेस ऑफ द रेनफॉल इज प्रेजेंट, देन आल्सो इट वुड क्रिएट द सेम प्रॉब्लम. राइट. सो रेनफॉल पैटर्न से सेडिमेंटेशन और ड्रेनेज पैटर्न प्रॉब्लम्स होंगी कोस्टल रीजन्स में. ड्रेनेज चेंज होगा तो ड्रेनेज के साथ कोरल कॉलोनीज पे स्ट्रेस आए. ठीक है. सी लेवल राइज से शैलो रीजन्स और ज्यादा, अभी ये शैलो रीजन में स्टैगहॉर्न और ये कोरल्स ग्रो हो रहे हैं. ठीक है. सी लेवल राइज यहां आ जाएगा. पहला तो पेनिट्रेशन ऑफ द लाइट डिस्टर्ब होगी, पहली बात. कैसे बढ़ेगा, पूरा स्टोन लेके आगे चला जाएगा. वो तो ग्रो तो अपनी कॉलोनी पे करेगा ना. ये बेस कॉलोनी है, अभी बोला वाटर यहां तक है. ठीक है. सनलाइट अच्छे से जा रहा है, अभी इसके बाद वाटर यहां तक है, सनलाइट पेनिट्रेट ही नहीं हो रहा है. ये अपना पूरा पेवमेंट उठा के कहां ले जाएगा. वो तो फिक्स कॉलोनीज है ना, इमूवेबल है ना. पॉलिप देखा था ना, एक कैल्शियम कैल्सेटाइट पे फिक्स्ड है, वो फिक्स कॉलोनीज को लेके कहां जाएगा. इनफैक्ट जब पेनिट्रेशन कम हो जाएगा तो स्पेसिफिकली जो स्टैगहॉर्न कोरल्स हैं जो 40 मीटर्स पे हैं, उन पे पेनिट्रेशन कम हो जाएगा तो अपने आप उनकी एल्गीज के लिए सनलाइट मिलेगा ही नहीं. तो सेकेंडली, when you have this particular cycle of low tide and high tide, there is a zone which has been created, no, near the coral shelves or near the coastal shelves itself, right. अभी क्या होगा, जैसे जैसे सी लेवल राइज होगा ये भी डिस्टर्ब होंगे. लो टाइड और हाई टाइड के जो जोन्स होंगे वो क्या होंगे, डिस्टर्ब होंगे. ज्यादा इनवर्ड हाई टाइड के कंडीशन में ज्यादा इनवर्ड टाइड्स जाएंगे. जब ज्यादा इनवर्ट टाइड्स जाएंगे तो क्या होगा, ज्यादा कोस्टल इरोजन करके सेडिमेंटेशन यहां पे करेंगे. ठीक है ना. दिस वाटर वुड बिकम मोर मडी, दिस वाटर वुड बिकम लेस ट्रांसपेरेंट, सो द चांसेस ऑफ पेनिट्रेशन ऑफ लाइट वुड अगेन बी मच मोर लेसर. राइट. सो दिस विल ऑल्सो क्रिएट अ प्रॉब्लम. सो इसका आंसर क्या होना चाहिए इस क्वेश्चन का, ऑल ऑफ देम. बेसिक क्वेश्चन है. देखो, करंट अफेयर्स डायरेक्टली यूपीएससी ने पूछना बंद कर दिया, ये आप लोगों ने पीवाईक्यू एनालिसिस में देख लिया होगा. देयर इज नो पॉइंट की डायरेक्ट करंट अफेयर्स, हार्डली 2 or 3 क्वेश्चंस व्हिच आर आल्सो अलग डोमेन्स. व्हाट दे आर आस्किंग राइट नाउ, करंट अफेयर्स से ओरिजिनेटेड कोई टॉपिक है उसका बेसिक, उसके बेसिक को हम थॉरोली कर लेना तो करंट अफेयर्स का यूटिलिटी अपने आप बन जाता है. जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल दी क्वेश्चन विच इज एसोसिएटेड विद पेट बॉटल्स और द क्वेश्चन एसोसिएटेड विद पैरासाइटोइडिज्म इन द लास्ट ईयर व्हिच वी स्पीक अबाउट. These are all those which are there in current affairs, but they haven't asked directly. They asked the basic. दैट्स व्हाई वी आर रीडिंग अबाउट मोर अबाउट द बेसिक थिंग्स, जिसका स्प्रेड जहां तक हो सकता है उसको करंट से लिंक कर देते हैं इन टॉपिक्स, राइट। जो ऑर्गेनिज्म अभी पढ़ेंगे, बायोडाइवर्सिटी में इंपॉर्टेंट ऑर्गेनिजम्स हैं, इंपॉर्टेंट स्पीशीज उसको पढ़ेंगे। फिर कुछ रीजन्स के अपने, जैसे इंडिया के कुछ अपने, इंडिया को अगर हम डिवाइड करते हैं तो 24-25 जोन्स में डिवाइड होता है इंडिया। दीज आर इको जोन्स, राइट, एंड इन एवरी इको जोन यू विल हैव सम स्पेसिफाइड से नेटिव ऑर्गेनिजम्स और एंडेमिक ऑर्गेनिज्म। तो ऐसा अगर आप क्लास बना लोगे तो देयर आर हार्डली 13-14 और हार्डली 20 ऑर्गेनिज्म जो हम जोन से डिफाइन कर सकते हैं। इस जोन का ये, इस जोन का ये, इस जोन का ये, फॉरेन रीजन वाले वैसे क्वेश्चन पूछ नहीं रहा वो, और पूछा था उसको चेज करना बंद करो। कितना चेज करो? यूपीएससी के 20% क्वेश्चंस को चेज करना ही नहीं चाहिए प्रैक्टिकली हर सब्जेक्ट में। वो वाला क्वेश्चन होता है जो सिर्फ इसलिए बनाया जाता है कि वो यूपीएससी थोड़ा सा ग्लैमर और ग्लोरीफाई हो जाए। हमारा काम 80 क्वेश्चंस, हमारा काम 60 क्वेश्चन सही करने से भी होता है। इफ इट इज रिक्वायर्ड, इज इट रिक्वायर्ड? ओके, ऑनलाइन में ब्रेक पॉसिबल है? ऑनलाइन स्टूडेंट्स है इसमें? राइट, सो अब किस किस रीजन से कहां जाएंगे तो दैट बिकम्स इलॉजिकल अभी राइट नाउ। अभी नाइदर यू हैव दैट मच अमाउंट ऑफ टाइम लेफ्ट ऑल्सो, जस्ट अपना इंडिया का कर लो उतना काफी। यू डोंट चेज दोज क्वेश्चंस आल्सो, राइट। क्या कितना चेज करना है हमें यूपीएससी में, उसको भी बार करना चाहिए, राइट। सो ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर मेथड्स, और वो अल्टीमेटली वो फैक्चुअल इंफॉर्मेशन को बढ़ाता है और कुछ नहीं रहेगा। वो कई बार क्वेश्चन जैसे वो लास्ट ईयर जो पूछा था उसने, वो करंट अफेयर से लिंक क्वेश्चन था और कुछ नहीं था, वो करंट अफेयर की इंफॉर्मेशन उसने डायरेक्टली पूछ ली। तो अगर ऐसा कुछ होगा तो इस बार भी होगा, तो इस बार भी बात कर लेंगे, राइट। Then we have another issue associated with mangroves also. The mangrove relative question, which is there in your page number 6 of your the content booklet that you have. The mangroves being the vital ecosystem under threat, which is being spoken of in this issue, right? Mangroves, if we simply speak about, they are the coastal ecosystem regions, right? And they specifically grow in three basic conditions. Number one, they grow in low oxygen conditions. They grow in high salt conditions, right? These are the basic. You want to go? Yeah, please. They also grow in high sediment conditions, right? They grow in different zones, or they grow in the flooded zones where there is a confluence of fresh water and there is a confluence of salt water, right? Now with the confluence of in these regions, different types of plants, they start to grow in the coastal regions, which itself becomes the mangrove ecosystems, right? In the mangrove ecosystem, we will find three different classes of the plants growing, right? First class of the mangrove that we can look up to, they grow near the coastal regions itself, and that becomes the red mangrove variety, right? These are those type of the plants which will have roots going up from the ground itself, right? It will look like this. The roots which are being grown, the water level can reach up to this. These roots, they have small pores, right? These are called as the prop roots, and they have small pores which are being used for oxygen exchange, as well as these roots are also being created for fixation in the muddy soil or in the loose soil itself. This fixes the soil also and this fixes the plant also, both the things. The second type of the mangroves that we see, they are black mangroves. Black mangroves have roots originating out of their primary roots. These roots, they move upward. So if the water fills up in these regions, right, they will have pores for oxygen exchange. These are black mangroves. And much inner we have white mangroves, right. The black mangrove have a wood which is blacker in color, right. The white mangroves have wood which are comparatively whiter in origination, right. The red mangroves, they are being given name because they appear to have red color flowers or red color embryo, or red color seed like appearance. So they are being given a name red mangrove. Red, black and white. These are three classes of the mangroves that we can see in the coastal regions itself. Right. Mangrove, when they live in such, we can say, hard conditions, they develop certain types of the adaptations. The first and the foremost adaptation that we can see in the mangroves is the adaptation associated with their roots. The three different classes of the mangroves have three different adaptations of the root system itself, where we have the red mangroves having this type of a root system, which is a prop root system, right. The black mangroves, which have pneumatophores or the pneumatophore roots, which originate out of the main root and it grows upward and is being used for oxygen exchange. And the third one are the white mangroves. They have roots just like this, which are called as the knee roots. Knee, pneumatophore and the prop are the three classes of adaptations that we can see. These are just the secondary root system used for oxygen exchange in the mangroves. The second class of adaptations that we can see with the mangroves is that these are the only classes of plants which exhibit a condition which is called as vivipary. Do you follow what is vivipary? Young one ko janda. There is ovipary and then there is vivipary. Ovipary means creating a egg-like structure, right? So in general case, with all the flowering plants, if you look up to, जो जितने भी flowering plants है जिसमें flower bear करते हैं वो, they will have their seeds which are being created in the flower itself, and the flower covers up the seed, which becomes a fruit and which is being then dispersed. In the due process of the life, the fruit would deteriorate, right? The seed would be exposed and seed would then germinate in the normal conditions. But since the mangroves, they are living in a harsh condition, they cannot have same type of the life cycle which is being taken up by the terrestrial plants. So what they do, they develop their seeds and let the seeds germinate on their body itself. The seed grow into larger embryo-like promugule. This promugule then flows in water, which is a partially matured individual. It goes into water and then immediately it comes into water, it will have a chance of developing roots because it will not have to wait for that, we can say, germination period, right? They are already germinated over the plant itself. That is the second evolution adaptation that we can see with the mangroves, which is called as vivipary. The third adaptation that the mangroves have, they store salt in their body, right? Three different classes of the mangroves, they store salt differently, right? Like for example, if we have red mangroves, since they grow near the shorelines itself, they do not let salt enter in their body structure. They have a membrane which prevent them from letting salt enter into these type of the mangrove. The second classes, which are the black mangroves, the black ones store salt in their tissues. So since they store salt in their tissues, it creates a kind of osmotic balance, right? Osmosis, समझते हो आप लोग? Everyone follow osmosis? Osmosis is something when the water moves from its higher concentration to lower concentration, the concentration of water, right? So outside mangrove, if there is salt plus water, and inside mangrove, if there is only salt, which is being stored, right? So concentration of water is lesser over here inside mangrove and is higher over here outside mangrove. So since they store salt, water percolates inside them and salt is being spread over there itself, right? The third classes of the mangroves, white mangroves, they store salt in leaves. Rather, this storage of salt in leaves is seen not only in white, it is seen in black and red mangroves also. Right? They keep on storing salt in the leaves, and the moment leaves store enough amount of the salt, they become mature and they shed the leaves. Right? So the leaves which are being shed, they are filled up with salt. So they store this salt also, which is also the basic adaptation of the mangroves itself. Right? So we have these classes of red mangroves, the black mangroves, the red mangroves which we can see near the shorelines, the black mangroves just below the shore, a bit far away from the shoreline, and then we have the white mangroves which is further inland into the from the shorelines. Right? रेड मैंग्रोव सॉल्ट को एंटर ही नहीं करने देता, पर स्टोर जरूर करता है. जब उसको जरूरत होती है तो सॉल्ट ऑर्गन्स उसका वाटर सॉल्ट को ले लेता है. If we look up to the overall distribution of the mangroves right now, majority of the mangroves, they are distributed all across the tropical regions. You'll find mangroves, in fact all of the mangroves, they are there in the tropical region, right? You will not find over here no mangroves in the temperate region, neither this side also, right? This becomes the temperate line over here in the southern hemisphere, and you will not find any kind of the mangrove below this. Also, this becomes the temperate line in the northern hemisphere, so you will not find mangrove above this, right? Naturally, India, Africa, South America, North America, Southeast Asia, Australia, these are those regions where we'll have much of the mangrove, right? The Asia hosts approximately more than 40% of the mangroves which are present in the world, right? Total mangroves are 1,50,000 square kilometers. Southeast Asia comprises 6.8% of the world mangrove. India comprises of 45% of the total mangrove of South Asia, right, which is approximately 3%. Approximately 3% of the global mangroves, they are being seen in India itself. Now, the problems over here with the mangroves, with the distribution, even if we look up to in the coastal regions, because of increasing events of heat and heat wave. One thing. Second thing, with increasing events of coastal storms. Right? Second thing, these are impacts of, we can say, climate change and submergence, specifically in the low-lying island countries. Low-lying island countries, these, right? The submergence of the land and specifically submergence of the coastal mangroves have created a threat, a large-scale threat, and it is being expected that by the time the sea level rise would go by 1 meter, that is by the end of this century, approximately 45% of the mangrove zones would be lost. Would be not temporarily lost, in fact it would be permanent lost, right? So submergence have posed a greater threat. Heat and heat wave in the coastal regions have also created a greater threat, where the dry spells are being enforced. The salt and the salt balance in the mangrove is also getting disturbed because of this dry spell, right? And the coastal storms are creating a larger impact over the coastlines themselves. Since the coastlines are getting influenced, so the mangroves are also getting influenced over it, right? So this itself poses a threat over 45% of the mangrove varieties across the globe itself, right? In India, if we look up to, then majority of the mangrove bound areas, if we can look up to, then we have mangrove in West Bengal, Odisha, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, In Kerala, we have very little amount of the mangrove because of backwaters being more submerged right now. Right? Karnataka, Goa, Gujarat. These are all the major regions. And also Daman and Diu, Andaman and Nicobar is also one of the major mangrove population area. Of them, the largest mangrove is present. Number one is West Bengal. This is according to the Forest Survey of India 2023. The State of Forest Report of 2023, which is right now accepted. अभी 25 में नया report आएगा. That to come in would come in say उसका meaning या ज़्यादा use है वो post आपकी PTE है. ठीक है. अभी 2023 report के according the largest mangrove population in India is with the West Bengal. Right. Then we can look up to the second largest right now is with Gujarat. And the third largest population of mangroves in India is with the Andaman and Nicobar Island. 1, 2, 3. They can be important. Right? Sundarbans become the major or the largest mangrove of the world and also the largest mangrove of Southeast Asia. Right? But it is not the largest mangrove of India. The Sundarbans, they are being created at the confluence of Padma, Brahmaputra and Meghna rivers in the Bay of Bengal and spans from Baleshwar river in Bangladesh and Hooghly river in West Bengal. Right? These rivers sometimes they are being asked. Baleshwar and Hooghly. Between Hooghly to Baleshwar. Baleshwar is there in Bangladesh, Hooghly is over there in Calcutta. Right? This is the basic stretch of mangroves. But it is not the largest mangrove of India because 70% of this Sundarban part is towards the Bangladesh. Right? Now this Sundarban is also facing a large scale threat right now, which is also there in current affairs. If we look up to Sundarbans right now, it is facing three major threats. Number one, the threat of submergence. Number second is the threat of pollution and choking. And the number third stretch is encroachment. Submergence because of increasing sea level rise, the confluence or the delta conditions over here, the confluence delta conditions of Meghna, this and Padma, they are getting disturbed over here, right? The island based things which are being created by Sundarban, it becomes a Sundarban island confluence actually. In the Sundarban, you have small islands on which the mangroves grow and it becomes a denser forestation over there. But with the increasing sea level, these islands may submerge, submerging the overall population of the mangroves also, right? So these, specifically the population of the red mangroves are at a particular thread in the Sundarbans because of submergence. The second major problem is because of pollution. Constant pollution in the coastal regions. These two rivers, specifically Ganga and Brahmaputra, they are constantly getting polluted and Ganga is already heavily polluted in India, right? Also, the similar condition is with Meghna over there and Padma over there in Bangladesh. Much amount of the textile waste and much amount of the industrial waste is being flown across Padma and Meghna into the Bay of Bengal, right? Which eventually is increasing the man-made sediments in this delta condition also. One thing. Second thing, with increasing events of flash flood in specifically in Ganga, Brahmaputra, upper regions, the sedimentation in the river stretches of these two rivers is also increasing, which eventually is storing much amount of the sediments or depositing much amount of the sediments in the delta conditions of specifically Meghna, which then is choking in the influence of or we can say the inflow of fresh water, right? It is choking in the inflow of फ्रेश वाटर. अभी अगर ये सुंदरबंस है, यहां से आपका ब्रह्मपुत्र गंगा का डेल्टा बन के फिर ये अगर ये आ रहा है एंड देयर आर मोर ऑफ दी सेडिमेंट्स विच आर बीइंग डिपॉजिटेड ओवर हियर, तो इससे होगा क्या, इवेंचुअली रिवर अपना फ्लो चेंज कर लेगी, ठीक है। अब उससे उससे प्रॉब्लम क्या होगा, अगर ये इनफ्लो कम होगा फ्रेश वाटर का, रिवर फ्रेश वाटर का इनफ्लो कम होगा, तो ओशनिक सॉल्ट वाटर की जो कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है या ओशनिक सॉल्ट वाटर का जो इन्फ्लुएंस है वो क्या होगा, इंक्रीज हो जाएगा, ठीक है ना, क्योंकि ये कॉन्फ्लुएंस रीजन है. दिस इज अ रीजन वेयर water from the oceans comes in and water from the rivers goes in. Now, if this is reduced, the relative concentration of this would increase, which eventually would create a monotonous condition of growth for the mangroves, which eventually would create a stress over the biodiversity of this region. The type of or the diversity of the living beings which we can see right now, they would eventually change also. This is also another problem which we can see right now. Another problem that we have seen in the Sundarbans is also associated with the encroachment. Much amount of the human population is constantly approaching towards Sundarbans, and they are present the denser colonies are present at the boundaries of the Sundarbans, which are again encroaching the Sundarbans, either disturbing the natural channel of flow of water or also disturbing the sidelines of the mangroves, or even deforestation is also seen. Sometimes illegal deforestation is also seen in these areas, which is becoming a problem with the Sundarbans, which is also been spoken of much recently in the current affairs, right? So ये एक चीज है. Then in India, the Pichavaram mangrove forest, which is present in the Tamil Nadu state, Pichavaram near the Chidambaram in Tamil Nadu, is the largest mangrove of India. Pichavaram is the largest of India, right? Second largest is Bhitarkanika of India. The largest is Pichavaram, second largest is Bhitarkanika, third largest is Sundarban as far as India is concerned, right? And also the Godavari Krishna also has the mangroves, the confluence of Ganges, Mahanadi, Krishna, Godavari, Kaveri, all of them, they have mangroves. The Kerala backwater have very little amount of mangrove. Lesser mangrove is present, the spread is lesser, density is higher in the Kerala. हमारे जानने के लिए क्या जरूरी है, पिचावरम याद हो, सेकंड पे भितरकनिका है, थर्ड पे सुंदरबंस है, and the basic threats which we can see right now over the mangroves, right? Mangroves become important for various reasons also, right? The basic importance of mangroves, simply they provide the habitat and nursery grounds for migratory birds or even different types of the species of plants and animals, etc. Right? They also serve as the buffer for the storm and the hurricane water also. The excess drainage is not being seen. Mangroves also would safeguard the coastlines in the events of any state of tsunami, or we can say hurricanes, or we can say any form of the storms. The coastal erosion is being protected, or the coastal erosion has been reduced because of the mangroves being present at the coastline. They reduce the overall velocity of water flowing towards the land, right? Be in case of tsunami also, and the water flows towards the land, they reduce the overall velocity of the water flowing through. And also when the water retreats off from the land, it also slows down the velocity. ठीक है, अगर ये मैंग्रोव है, वाटर इस तरफ से आ रहा है, तो जिस स्पीड से वो आ रहा है उस वेलोसिटी को वो कम कर देगा, सो दैट जो कोस्टल इरोजन पे स्टॉर्म का इंपैक्ट हो सकता था वो कम हो जाता है. प्लस फिर जब वो फिल अप हो जाएगा, फिर वो रिट्रीट करेगा वाटर आफ्टर दी पोस्ट द डिजास्टर और पोस्ट द स्टॉर्म और इवन पोस्ट द सुनामी. जब वो रिट्रीट करेगा तब भी ये जाते हुए वाटर का क्या करेगा, वेलोसिटी रिड्यूस करेगा, जिससे दिस लैंड इज नॉट बीन इरोडेड, विच इज द कोस्टल लैंड which is not eroded, which is the basic use of it, right? Protects the shoreline from erosion, protect the roosting and the nesting sites of many birds also, improve water quality and water clarity also, because the mangroves, the roots of the mangroves, they filter water over here. So sediments are being accumulated by the roots and they filter the water. So the water quality also increases over here, right? They provide food and many, we can say, marine organisms. They can trap and cycle organic material, support endangered species and use in the renewable resources, etc. Medicinal plants, food, right? They are also being provided by mangroves. All of these, they can be the basic utility of mangroves itself, right? So a simple question 2-3 questions can be raised over here. Number one, what is the basic mangrove distribution in India? What all states have mangrove? This can be first question, type of question. The second type of questions, type of question can be what all are the importances of the mangroves, right? What all things are being created. And third can be what are the major threats associated with mangroves. ये basic question है, but अगर करंट में आएगा मैंग्रोव से एक लिस्ट आउट करोगे तो ये क्वेश्चंस आपको कहीं ना कहीं देखने मिल जाएंगे. ठीक है, यू कैन राइट डाउन अ क्वेश्चन ओवर हियर. सुंदरबन. वेस्ट बंगाल में सुंदरबन ही सबसे बड़ा है, उससे पैचेस हैं वेस्ट बंगाल में, बट सुंदरबन से एसोसिएटेड ही मानते हैं उसको. इन टर्म्स ऑफ ज्योग्राफिक, इन टर्म्स ऑफ सबसे बड़ा है, लेकिन स्टैंड अलोन नहीं. पिचावरम क्या है? स्टैंड अलोन. सबसे बड़ा जब मानोगे ना, सुंदरबन डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देखोगे या क्वांटिफाई करोगे तो टोटल सुंदरबन में करोगे, तो टोटल सुंदरबन का जो एक पैच है, जो सुंदरबन का पैच है, वो छोटा है पिचावरम से. ठीक है, पैचेस में तो है. ठीक है, एल्स देन सुंदरबन भी पैचेस में है, पर वो छोटे छोटे पैचेस हैं. और सुंदरबन का जो पैच है वो पिचावरम के पैच से छोटा है. इसलिए लार्जेस्ट मैंग्रोव इन इंडिया बिकम्स पिचावरम. Okay. Which of the following are correct regarding mangroves? Which of the following are correct regarding mangroves? They are helpful. They are helpful in reducing soil erosion in coastal areas. Statement number 2, they are helpful in filtering water. They are helpful in filtering water for unconfined aquifers. Unconfined aquifers. Third, they are sources of food, medicine, and insect repellents. Sources of food, medicines, and insect repellents. D, they are helpful in increasing or regulating, not increasing, in regulating transpiration rates of coastal vegetation. Transpiration rates of coastal vegetation. Which of them are correct? 1, 3, and 4, or 1, 2, and 3, 2, 3, 4, all of them are correct. Simple questions. Next, one more you can write down. Which of the following are the major threats to mangroves? Number 1, fire. Number 2, encroachment. Number 3, sedimentation. Number 4, increased warming. Number 5, deforestation. Choices. Two, four, five. B. Fire hoga because of increasing dry spell towards the land. The white mangroves, they are at a particular threat, right? The Avicennia forest that we see. And encroachment, of course, is because of human settlements. Sedimentation is leading towards choking, right? Increased warming, of course, is. Deforestation, of course, is. So all of them, they can be correct. Mangroves also have one more important aspect, that they act as a larger source of blue economy, or we can say blue carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestration is a state where any particular area on the earth absorbs carbon in the form of, say, carbon dioxide or any other form, absorbs carbon for any particular carbon which is being created at any part else than that particular area, right? Say for example, we have one area A, we have one area B. Area B is a thermal power plant. It produces carbon dioxide, right? And we have a forest somewhere else, right? That forest absorbs the carbon dioxide which is being produced by the thermal power plant. This becomes sequestration. Is compensating for the carbon dioxide which is not being produced by that particular area or that ecosystem, rather is being produced by any other area. That is called as sequestration, just reducing the carbon over here. Terrestrial or habitats or the terrestrial forest systems, they are the carbon sequestration sources. They absorb much amount of the carbon which is otherwise being produced by the industrial factors, right? Now, mangroves, they are much better than the terrestrial aspects or the terrestrial forest, because it absorbs carbon dioxide, or it creates a sequestration 4 times than the terrestrial forest systems, or it absorbs carbon dioxide 8 times than the terrestrial ecosystems, because the mangroves can store the carbon not only over here in the leaves, because terrestrial plants कार्बन को स्टोर करेंगे, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड को एब्जॉर्ब करेंगे, ग्लूकोज बनाएंगे, अपना बायोमास बनाएंगे, राइट? मैंग्रोव्स भी वही करेंगे, बट मैंग्रोव्स हैव अ ग्रेटर बायोमास बिलो द land, or we can say below the water, which is in the form of roots, and they are carbon storing roots, because these are storing roots. The type of roots which are present with mangrove, they are storing roots, so they absorb more amount of the carbon below the ground much above, so it remains partially more fixed. Plus the water areas which are present near the mangroves, they also will absorb carbon dioxide, they will also dissolve carbon dioxide, so it absorbs more carbon than the terrestrial plants, right? It absorbs 4 times, 8 times more storage is being seen in the mangroves than the terrestrial plants, and 4 times more sequestration is being seen, right? 4 times sequestration, 8 times more storage. This has also been there in the news in the last 2-3 years itself, right? The basic role of mangroves in the blue economy, and mangroves are being taken up as those sources which have a higher influence on the blue economy. And damages to mangroves can be seen because of climate change, floods, wildlife and pests, and the weeds also. Yes, of course. The invasive species. Invasive species of plants or algae, they are competing with the plants over here. Also, the invasive species of animals, fishes, etc. They are competing with the fishes which are naturally present in these type of the ecosystems, which then disturbs the overall cyclic pattern of the ecosystem in these regions, right? If a particular fish species is in interaction with, say, a red mangrove plant, which is helping it in some of the ways, or is in a food cycle with that mangrove plant, if that is being replaced by, say, small fish, mussel, that is not inhabitant of, say, Bangladesh or India, is an inhabitant of, say, Australia, and comes down in Bangladesh, replaces the original species. Now the overall influence of it would be the patterns, the cycles of that particular ecosystem would change. That will have an impact on the overall biodiversity of that particular ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, one particular type of species linked to its ecosystem through various different functions, etc., that influences its development and growth and its existence. That's why ecosystem is important for any particular species. If the living organisms or the animals are changing, the patterns of existence of mangroves may also change. That may create additional pressure over the mangroves. So invasive species are also creating an impact over the mangroves, right? Tourism, coastal development, agriculture, the lumber industry, the wood industries, and the shrimp farming, etc. Shrimp farming is actually changing the overall diversity over there, is linked with this invasive species, right? Was there in 2023 current affairs also, right? The shrimp farming in the mangrove regions and the impact over the biodiversity, right? So just to remember the thing or just to associate with the things, isko yaad rakhiye. Another thing that we can look up to is associated with wetlands and lakes, the ecosystems and issues associated with various things over here in your booklet. If you look up to, then Ashtamudi Lake relative issue, then the Little Prespa Lake related issue, the Ramsar site related issue, the Kanwar Lake related issue, the Hokersar wetland related issue in Kashmir, the Pantanal wetland related issue in the Bolivia. These are all those which are associated with the, and also there's one more, the wetlands of Periyar River. These are those which are associated with this, right? We'll discuss about these issues with respect to this, right? Wetlands, if you look up to, wetlands are large inland water sources or large drainage based water sources, right? They are shallower and broader than other water sources which may be lakes. If you look up to, then lake can be wider and deeper, right? Whereas an wetland can be wider but less deeper. If you look up to, this is wetland, this is lake, comparative, right? This could be a small lake, this could be a pond, this could be a shallow pond. Shallow ponds are much more smaller than the wetlands, etc. So if we compare this thing, lakes versus wetland, then there are 2-3 things associated. One, lakes are deeper, wetlands are shallower. Lakes can be 8 meter and deep. This is less than 8 meters. And there is no defined criteria, it is just a generalized criteria, 8 meters, right? They have light and no light zones, photic and aphotic zones, lakes, right? Because Light can penetrate up to a point, and then below that, if they are deeper lakes, light may not penetrate over there. Wetlands can be those where we'll have light zones. Right? They can be formed by any external water body. Like we have the oxbows, etc. But most of the wetlands, they are in a natural channel of the we can say water flow, or it is being created as a slope inland. It can be an inland slope which is being created. Lakes can also be salt water and fresh water. Wetlands can also be salt and fresh water. These are the things associated with lakes and wetlands. So in the lakes, you will have the photic zones which are being created, the aphotic zones which are being created, littoral limnetic zones and the benthic zones which are being created. ये आपने पढ़ा होगा शायद generally lakes के बारे में, right? Lakes also have the temperature stratification where they have the upper layer as a different temperature zone, the middle layer as a different temperature zone, and the lower zone as a different temperature zone. This also you might have read. One of the major wetlands, if you look up to, then wetlands, they remain as a slope of land itself. So they store water. Number one, they store water over here through various land-based channels. Number second, they help in infiltration of water. Water from these wetlands, it can trickle down across the soil layers and can reach up to the lower strata of the water, which is present with the soil itself, which becomes the aquifer or the groundwater, the unconfined aquifer. So they become one of the major source of recharge of unconfined aquifer also. Then they can also have various plants and animals growing through, so they are important for biodiversity as well, right? They also have a drainage from the land-based sources, so they help to control floods also. Store water, control flood, then harvest water also, right? Store biodiversity, or we can be zones of biodiversity. That's why wetlands are large-scale important ecosystems. There could be various different types of wetlands, like we can have marshes and we can have bogs, fen and swamp, right? Marshes are those मार्शेस और बॉग के बीच में, मार्शेस और फेंस के बीच में अगर हम देखें, मार्शेस और स्वैम्प्स के बीच में अगर डिफरेंस देखोगे, एनी पर्टिकुलर एरिया यू हैव लैंड, राइट? एनी पर्टिकुलर एरिया वेयर देयर इज वाटर and there is some amount of land, water and land, that becomes a marsh. Swamp is any particular land where water gets logged in, right? तो swamp में आपको forest देखने मिलता है, लेकिन marsh में आपको grassland देखने मिलता है, ठीक है? Difference ये है. Bogs or fens, basically they are a kind of peatland structures where bogs are more acidic, fens are more alkaline in nature, right? Bogs में जो water है वो उनका खुद का अंडरग्राउंड वाटर हो सकता है, फेंस में जो वाटर है वो कोई फ्लोइंग वाटर हो सकता है, पीटलैंड. Then wetlands provide various different types of the services like food, fresh water, fiber, biochemical, genetical resources also. They help in climate regulation, water regulation, the water flow, water purification, erosion regulation, pollination, etc. can be done. Then they can provide recreational benefits also. They help in soil formation, nutrient cycling, etc., which are the basic advantages of, we can say, the wetland based ecosystem. The wetland based ecosystem are getting disturbed because of various threats like urbanization, anthropogenic activities like which can add on to agriculture, and even the urban development, industries, road construction, impoundment, etc. that can lead towards encroachment of the wetlands also can be problem. Agricultural activities flow in much amount of the pesticide and the insecticides over here, which also becomes problem. Right? The hydrological activities where we can say irrigation, etc., or flooding up of these regions can also be problem. Deforestation in these zones can be problem. Pollution, specifically sewage and the toxic chemicals, they can be a problem. salination of these regions because of the groundwater which may remain salinated, or less amount of the groundwater if it is present and it pumps out into the wetlands, then it can salinate the wetland. Introduce different types of the invasive species or the alien species can have a problem, and climate change related issues can be problem, right? In our current affairs, there are three things which have been spoken of. Number one, the Ashtamudi lake has been spoken of, and in which the influence of plastic waste material, poultry waste material in the household sewage, etc. has created a problem in the Ashtamudi, and the biodiversity is constantly decreasing. With your booklet, it would be expected कि आप at least Ashtamudi का geographical location जो है ना वो समझ लेना, क्योंकि कई बार question वहाँ से आ जाता है. The second one is associated with the Kanwar Lake. The Kanwar Lake is also facing, or the Kanwar Tal, which is present over on the Gandak River in the Begusarai district of Bihar. The Kanwar Tal is facing problem associated with encroachment over there. Much amount of the human encroachment, which is leading up towards drying up of the coast, drying up of the outbound lands, and then it is in page number 5, Kanwar Lake, right? And constantly approaching humans over there are disturbing the overall ecosystem and the biodiversity of that particular region also. Then the Hawkersar wetland in Kashmir is facing a particular problem because of drying spells in Kashmir. Less amount or little amount of the rainfall is drying up of the water in the Hawkersar lake, which is also creating a problem, right? And then these three things have been spoken of at a large. We can speak about the problems or the issues relative to air pollution. The pollution related issues also we can speak about, right? Air pollution, if we look up to, then there are multiple sources of air pollution. Thus I'm trying to sum up. आप लोगों का टाइम क्या है जाने का? 5 o'clock. ठीक है, जो issues हम कर सकते हैं, we'll see. Right, there are multiple problems associated. ये आपको पता होगा, ये सब आपने पढ़ा है. Gases which are problems: carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide has been in news because of Niti Aayog coming up with certain alterations in the thermal power plant and the amount of sulfur dioxide that can be released. Abhi, the amount of sulfur dioxide that should be released must remain at 80 ppm, which is the prescribed limit by the CPCB, Central Pollution Control Board. ठीक है, नीति आयोग ने अभी इस पे रिलैक्सेशन देने के लिए बोल दिया, और वो रिलैक्सेशन इसलिए देने के लिए बोल दिया है बिकॉज कुछ पावर प्लांट्स हैं जो इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, लेकिन उनका स्टेज, उनका अपग्रेडेशन अभी नहीं हुआ. तो नीति आयोग चाहता था कि ये SO2 का जो कॉन्सेंट्रेशन है उसको चेंज कर, थोड़ा सा लिमिट को बढ़ा के 100 ppm तक ले जाए. ठीक है, लेकिन अभी राइट नाउ दैट इज बीन हॉल्टेड. ठीक है, दैट इज बीन डिबेटेड राइट नाउ. ये एक इशू है जो अभी करंट अफेयर्स में है. देन द इश्यूज ऑफ पार्टिकुलेट मैटर एसोसिएटेड व्हिच मे बी फ्रॉम स्टबल बर्निंग, दैट इशू वी मे डिस्कस, राइट. Then the problems associated with smog, etc., nitrogen oxides, etc., that can be the major thing. Right now, the major problem associated with Indian air system is with the black carbon. Black carbon, or what we call as soot. Soot is something which is the residual mass associated with any kind of the fire. If you will burn anything, right? कुछ चीज burn करते हो ना, वो smoke like जो निकलता है ना, बर्निंग के टाइम पे जो ब्लैक ब्लैक स्मोक है, केरोसिन लैंप भी बर्न करोगे तो जो स्मोक है, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज सूट. सूट बिकम्स एन एरोसॉल ओवर देयर कॉल्ड एज ब्लैक कार्बन, which itself is one of the major cause for warming, climate change also, one of the major greenhouse gas like factor also, right? Soot is being formed, is majorly formed because of 51% of it is being created because of household energy. And in the recent issues, there are two things which have been spoken of. One is associated with kerosene lamp. Another one is associated with sesame lamp. Two issues have been highlighted over here. This has been spoken that the kerosene lamp which is being used in the villages is creating a large scale soot based pollution, and approximately 27% increase in the black carbon is seen because of kerosene lamp in the rural India. Also, this has been spoken of that there has been an increase of 6 to 7% in the black carbon because of the oil lamp, the sesame oil lamp which are being burned during festivals or during various different devotion related activities in India, right? Although that has been spoken of as a seasonal increase, but ये current affairs में इसके बारे में बात किया. Then we can also see black carbon associated with the transport. The diesel engines, they will produce more of the smoke. Agriculture, then industrial production, waste burning, etc., fossil fuel operations and large scale combustion activities, etc., they can all be black carbon related activities. Simple question बन सकता है, which of the following are the causes or reasons for formation of black carbon, or which of the following would emit more amount of the black carbon? तो 3-4 ऑप्शन दे सकते हैं. जैसे इसके पहले इन लोगों ने क्वेश्चन पूछा था हाइड्रोफ्लोरोकार्बन्स पे 2023, right? Which of the following are the sources associated with hydrofluorocarbon emission? In the same way, which of the following can be sources associated with emission of the black carbon, right? Black carbon becomes dangerous because black carbon, as it rises up into the atmosphere, it causes two major problems. Number one, it causes smogging, specifically photochemical smogging. And photochemical smogging then becomes one of the major reasons for the warming up of the lower atmosphere, right? Photochemical smog, you follow what is that? ठीक है ना, clear है ना photochemical smog क्या है? So that would create more amount of the warming of the lower atmosphere, and that will enforce more amount of the warming or becomes a climate change related factor also. Secondly, black carbon associated over there up into the region can also darken up the clouds, which can have an impact over the rainfall cycle or which can have an impact over the albedo cycle onto the earth. That disturbs the overall solar variabilities, or that disturbs the overall sun heat budget also. That can be the second problem associated with black carbon. ये दो problem है. There is also brown carbon, right? Combustion से 70% of the dry mass which is being created, or the dry aerosol type conditions which are being created, they are black carbon, but approximately 20% of the conditions which are being created as brown carbon. Brown carbon is also problematic because when it rises up, it creates a cloud like appearance into the atmosphere, which will again create warming or can lead towards dimming in any particular region. Secondly, it would also harvest aerosols, or it will also harvest chemicals which may cause formation of the photochemical smog. So ye black and brown carbon, they become the two things. Then things have also been spoken of crop stubble, right? Crop stubble burning has also been one of the major issue that we can see in India. Burning up of the farmland lead towards various different problems, and 1 ton of the rice straw which is being burnt causes 3 kg of the particulate matter, 60 kg of carbon monoxide, 1460 kg of carbon dioxide, ashes and sulfur dioxide. So दो question है इसमें. Which of the following are the outcomes of crop stubble burning, right? That can be one thing. Second thing can be the major health hazards associated with crop stubble burning, lung related problem. And in the recent report, it has also been spoken of that there was a survey being done in Punjab specifically by the Indian Council of Medical Research also, and by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, relative to the lung health of the individuals living in Punjab. And it has been said in that report that 97% of the inhabitants have a reduced lung capacity in those regions which have a higher crop stubble burning incidences which are being seen, right? This has been there in current affairs. So crop stubble का एक issue तो ये है, ठीक है? It reduces the lung capacity of the inhabitants. ये problem है. Apart from this, asthma related problems, burning up of the eyes and nose associated with that because of sulfur dioxide increase in that particular region, acidity of the soil, etc. can be the problems associated. So poor visibility, chronic diseases, loss of the fodder which can otherwise be used for any other aspects of animals also, loss of the yield because the overall soil related aspects, they are being decreased, industrial losses because the raw materials of the stubble burning or the crop stubble can be used for various different industry like fodder industry or the straw based industry which are being used in bedding material for various different fruit packaging material or bedding material for, we can say, ethanol based industries, etc., can be at a loss. Global warming, soot particle causing smog, etc., greenhouse gas emission. This also, soil fertility loss. It is also been spoken much recently in current affairs that because of burning up of the we can say paddy based crop stubble which has been seen in India, approximately with each ton of the paddy which is being burnt, 5.5 kg of the nitrogen, 2.3 kg of the phosphorus, 25 kg of the potassium and 1.2 kg of the sulfur, in addition to the organic substances, are being lost. Specifically with 1 ton paddy which is being burnt, the nitrogen losses over here, or the nitrogen and phosphate losses, are being seen as the loss of the humus forming material which is being burnt. अगर आप किसी भी प्लांट को बर्न कर दोगे, अदरवाइज बर्न नहीं करोगे, उसको छोड़ दोगे वहीं पे, तो इवेंचुअली क्या करेगा, नाइट्रोजन, कार्बन और फॉस्फेट बेस्ड ह्यूमस फॉर्मेशन करेगा अपर लेयर में, जो जनरली लॉस हो जाता है. सेकेंडली, विद द बर्निंग अप ऑफ द crop stubble, the higher temperature reduces the nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil, which is then again is lost, right, which again then remains non useful for the plant to be used in the soil. ये समझ में आ रहा है या ज्यादा फास्ट हो रहा है? अच्छा, अभी ज्यादा फास्ट है क्या? समझ में आ रहा है? That is my point. Things are, there are a plenty of issues. I'm trying to cover up too much of the information. Too much of the information.
I'm not saying boring, but eventually too much of factual.
I'm trying to make it less factual also. Facts तो मैं.
I'm sorry.
You're fatigued.
It is 7 hours of tests.
अच्छा. Just 10-15 minutes more, right? Just 1 or 2 more issues, that's all. So much amount of it is being lost from the soil itself, these important aspects of it. Then the organic, this has been into news. The burning up of the paddy lead towards loss of these nutrients. This was there in the current affairs, or this is there in the current affairs. Even we can find it in page number 13 of your booklet, right? The issue speaks about all these things. It has been seen that because of the crop stubble burning, constantly the the air quality, specifically in Delhi NCR, is deteriorating, where we can see much amount of the biomass burning adds on to the additional load of pollutants, where the foggy, or we can say smoggy conditions, are being seen in Delhi and NCR because of this. Then there are multiple things that the government has also taken care of, where the crop stubble burning must be reduced, has been taken up as an aspect, where different machines have been distributed by the governments. The happy seeder machine, in which you need not to burn out the crop stubble or cut down the crop stubble, you can simply burrow down into the stubble itself. We create a mulch of the stubble. Mulch is a covering of the soil, and then we bore it down directly, and a new seed can be bored down directly into the crop without clearing up of the soil itself. That is happy seeder, right? Then the super seeder also, the super straw management system also, where the over the straw itself the cropping next cycle of the cropping can be done. There could be mulchers, where the mulchers helps in maintaining a level of we can say stubble over the crop itself, that helps in creating a cover over the crop, reduces the water losses also, improves the soil carbon based contents also, and the next crop can be taken up, and it also reduces the overall cost of production for the farmer as well, right? That has been taken up by the governments, but it didn't turn out. There are multiple things. Either the machines never reached up to the farmers, or the farmers were not willing to this, or the cost of the machines was more higher, or the cost of machine operation was much more higher for the farmer. So eventually these programs didn't help the farmers. Other things that can be done. Now this can be something which can be taken up as the next thing that can come up. What all can be done, or what is the basic economy of the stubble burning, right? The basic economy of the stubble burning or the crop residue can be used for various things, like it can be used for biochar production. Biochar is something when any organic matter is being burnt in a controlled condition and it gets converted into a 99% carbon output, that becomes a biochar that can be directly used as charcoal, as a fuel material, as a soil additive also, biochar, right? It can help in mushroom cultivation also. It can help in building material, etc. There could be various different building materials that can be built out of it, right? It can then help in bioenergy production as well. Bioenergy production would be formation of, we can say, either waste to energy directly, or bioethanol generation can also be driven over here, right? It can also be helpful in on-farm disposal, where on the farm it can help in conservational agriculture, where a mulch of it can be created, which can help in reducing the overall water losses also and water requirements also with the soil. And livestock and feeding things can also be created. Overall, in a larger scale, we have created a 3-scale strategy for the stubble management also. Governments can take up 3-scale strategy. Number 1 is crops residue management. First is we can manage the residue. Second is we can utilize it for animal feed, for cooking systems, for composting, for roof thatching, etc. Then we can use it in conservational agriculture, waste vaporization, and climate. Conservational agriculture is when we cover the soil, we cover the agricultural system with the natural sources, and we reduce the overall requirements of the agriculture. Like for example, zero budget natural farming, etc. They are the conservational agricultural tools, right? Where we try to conserve the agriculture, right? Or try to conserve the resources which are present in the agricultural farmland, so that less amount of the impact has been created with the resources. That may be water, that may be soil nutrients, that may be soil itself, that may be the soil losses also must be reduced, right? That becomes conservational agriculture. Then we can create it for bioenergy production, biofuel, etc. That all can be the basic economy that can be driven out of crop stubble, right? मशरूम कल्टीवेशन जो स्ट्रॉ वगैरह यूज होता है ना, तो वो फीडर स्टॉक के जैसे काम करता है. बैग्स में मशरूम्स को कल्टीवेट करते हैं और वो फीडर स्टॉक के जैसे काम करता है. फॉर एयर क्वालिटी रेगुलेशन इन इंडिया वी हैव सीन वेरियस डिफरेंट थिंग्स. आप लोग चलो जाओ, वील डिस्कस मोर थिंग्स लेटर. नेक्स्ट क्लास में डिस्कस करते हैं. नेक्स्ट क्लास इज मोर फैक्चुअल ऑल्सो. आई मीन जो बायोडाइवर्सिटी वाला क्लास है ना, उसमें कॉम्पनसेट हम कर लेंगे. फैक्चुअल इन्फॉर्मेशन होगा उसको वहां. थैंक यू.